Oh man, 5.5 years ago, that sure is a long time. Yeah, so that's right, I'm redoing this video again. The very first video I ever put up on the channel, in fact. The reasons being, I feel like it kinda needs to be redone. I definitely did not do the topic justice in the original video. I would also like to imagine that my presentation style has improved somewhat, although I guess I still kinda do the same style, but I hope I'm more interesting now. And we also recently hit 1,000 subscribers, which is, you know, that's pretty cool, so I guess it's sort of a nice milestone to, you know, redo this on. So there was definitely a lot of issues with the original video, and I hope to address those and really do the topic of this justice. Of course, that topic being installing Windows XP on the minimum system requirements, which was a bit of an issue people took with the original video. I'm pretty sure I knew this when I made the video, but I don't think I mentioned it at all. The idea for the video was to go off of the actual system requirements Microsoft printed on the bottom of the XP box, and I think also put on like their website and stuff. That is what I'm going off of. I'm going off of Microsoft's officially listed system requirements. I know you can boot XP with less than 64 megabytes of RAM. God help you if you do. I know you can install it on basically any like Pentium compatible CPU. Anything that's a true 586 in theory can run XP. So all the way down to like an original 60 megahertz Pentium, XP in theory has no issue running on it. So yeah, I just want to make that clear. We're going off of what Microsoft said down here and not what's actually possible. Now of course we need to know what these system requirements actually are, and it says 300 megahertz processor or higher with 233 megahertz minimum required. Intel Pentium/Celeron family, AMD K6 Athlon Duron family, or compatible processor recommended. We are using a 233 megahertz Pentium for this. The reason being, it's just what I happen to have. I do have a 233 megahertz AMD K6, and that's an original K6, not a K6-2, so it does match what this says. I chose not to use that because the K6 is actually slightly faster clock for clock in integer performance compared to the original Pentiums. So technically in this case, the Pentium should be the slower CPU. Maybe not in floating point performance, but most of what we're going to be doing here, most of the running of the operating system itself, is going to be integer, you know, calculations. 128 megabytes of RAM recommended. You bet it's recommended. 64 megabytes minimum supported, may limit performance and some features. Yeah, no kidding. We're going to see a lot of that later. 1.5 gigs of available hard drive space. Super VGA 800 by 600, CD, ROM drive, mouse, keyboard. Yeah, okay. As you can see, this is not the same computer that I used in the first video. I still have all the components for the original machine. And it all still works for the most part. Like the motherboard still works, CPU obviously still works because that's what we're using here. I think there was only 2 casualties. The original 2 gig Seagate hard drive, that died I don't think very long after that video. And the original Trident video card, I had 2 of them that were like the same model, and one of them died. I don't know which one it was, so that may have also died. But everything else still technically works from that machine. Oh wait, no, not the power supply. That went up in magic smoke. Okay, so there was a couple casualties, but you know, we're here. I'm using this machine again. This is a Super Socket 7 system, just like the last one. XP mentions nothing about a specific motherboard, so I'm just using a Super Socket 7 board out of convenience. This is an Asus P5A, which is not a bad Super Socket 7 board. It is a little bit more desirable because it's in an ATX form factor instead of AT. It has the Aladdin 5 chipset, I believe, which is... it's an alright chipset. I think a lot of people would probably rather have VIA. It's serviceable, it works. And there's not really too much interesting going on here. Instead of that Trident card, I could have dug up the other one, but that thing sucks, so I don't want to use it. I'm using a Matrox Millennium 2, which I think has 2 megabytes, expandable to 4 megabytes of video RAM. XP doesn't actually list how much video RAM you need. Doesn't really matter. It just says as long as you can do 800 by 600. This is just some random generic sound card. I think it's a Yamaha XG. I don't know really anything about it. It was just in this computer when I got it, so I just decided to use it. XP doesn't even say you need a sound card, but we're going to do some sound-related things, so, you know, we kind of want to have one. I did add this USB 2 card down here, because for whatever reason I couldn't get the USB ports on the actual computer to work. I don't know if it's just like they're dead, maybe there's some sort of fuse or something that's blown on them. I don't know, I just could not get them to work. So I had to add this USB card just because I needed to copy some files over. Just have a CD burner. I really wanted to get specific. I could have dug up just a plain CD-ROM drive, but I don't care, man. Oh, and the top CD drive is dead and it's not hooked up. And then this hard drive is actually very similar to the one from the original machine. I think it's a 2.1 gigabyte Seagate something. I don't think it's a Barracuda, it's something. Yeah, I don't know how much longer this drive will last, but this drive still seems like it's okay. I haven't really seen it, like, really struggle, so I think it's still okay. Oh yeah, and the RAM, we just have some single stick of 64 megabyte Kingston PC. I think it's supposed to be up to PC 133, but it's only going to run at 66 megahertz because we have a 66 megahertz bus. So, you know how I was complaining about the RAM earlier? I do have an identical 64 megabyte stick, so we will be expanding this to 128 megabytes just to show that the performance problems with XP on a machine like this is 100% the RAM, and maybe a little bit the hard drive. This is not a very fast hard drive, but mostly the RAM and not really the CPU, because surprisingly, the CPU could actually still hold up in certain things, as we'll see. So in the last video, we installed XP on the computer on video. I'm not going to do that again. It's just an XP install. The only interesting thing about it is that it took quite a while. It actually took, I would say, probably about as long as it did in the original video. About an hour and 40-something minutes, which is very lengthy for XP. I'm used to XP only taking maybe 20, 30 minutes, so I have no idea if the boot time is dependent on the CD drive, because I actually don't know how fast that CD drive is. I don't think that's the main issue, though. I think it might partially be down to, like, the hard drive. Of course, that's probably a factor as well, but I think it's mostly just, again, the RAM. And the same goes for the boot up time. Hard drive will again have a factor, but I think the actual thing that's hindering us here, in even the boot time, is going to be the RAM. So, of course, I think it's only appropriate that we time it. From power button to a pretty much fully loaded desktop is what I'm going to consider booted. Okay, I think that's about fully loaded. I was waiting for all the icons on the bottom to fully load. 2 minutes and basically about 15 seconds. That is pretty ridiculous for a boot up, although using XP on a Pentium 4 with a heavily bloated XP install, I was kind of used to those boot times back in the day. I guess it's not the world's worst boot time, 2 minutes. I guess, you know, you turn on the machine, you go away, you get your coffee or whatever. Doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it should be like that, but I guess it is. And that's the other thing about the original video, is I installed XP Service Pack 3. Definitely was not a good idea, although I didn't have access to any sort of XP RTM. Apparently I didn't know about obtaining one online. So we're rocking original XP RTM. I could have went with Service Pack 1. I don't think that would have really impacted the performance any. It would have just fixed maybe a couple bugs, but I haven't run into any of like the XP RTM bugs like with sound and stuff. So this is basically giving it the best possible chance to be fast. And it is still not fast. So that kind of brings us to one of my main questions for this. What would compel anyone to, on a machine like this, to upgrade to XP, you know, instead of sticking with maybe Windows 95, that was certainly a possibility for this machine. Maybe they had 98, or heck, even 2000, I would say was probably a better option for this machine, but, you know, we're gonna see. You know, compared to, like, if this was running, say, 98, that'd probably be the most likely. I just want to see, why would anyone want to do this? I can't imagine many people did, but there's got to have been a few who did on a very similar configuration to this, and I just want to figure out what was going through their heads. So one thing about XP that makes it kind of bad for especially a low RAM machine that's this old is the amount of junk it loads in the background. It loads a bunch of services in the background, especially compared to 98. 98, 95 have really not that many services loaded at startup. XP definitely has a lot more, even more than like Windows 2000, which is why I say it would probably be better suited to 2000. One thing it loads by default is Windows Messenger, which I think after Service Pack 2 that stopped being loaded by default. And of course you can disable that at startup. You know, how many people are going to know that you have to go into msconfig, go to startup, and disable the services you want? Probably not a lot of people. Your average person's probably not going to know that they should do that, or they're probably just not going to care. So if we look right here after closing Windows Messenger, I just hit Control-Shift-Escape, by the way, and it took Task Manager that long to pop up. As we can see, total available memory, it says it has 20 megabytes available. I guess there's 20 megabytes available physical memory, but it might be, but it also is constantly swapping things on and off the hard drive anyways. That way you don't end up with a scenario where you actually run out of physical memory, because that's bad. But yeah, actually just clicking around the OS, like here, I'm going to double click right now. It's not the slowest in the world, but it's definitely not fast. Certainly not what I would call ideal. Yes, it's usable, but XP, even on a slightly faster machine, or even just with more RAM, I think, would probably be better at this. Of course, I guess we'll find out for sure once I put in the 128 megabytes of RAM, but yeah, that's my current theories. It's really the RAM that's holding us back, not the CPU. So as you can see, we do have some goodies here, but we're not going to start off with any of those. I think first to start off with, we have to start off with a really basic test. Something that I would expect someone with a machine like this to probably do, and that's run Microsoft Office. So I've installed Office 2000, which I don't think Office XP came out right at launch of XP, but Office 2000 was still very relevant by the time XP came out. This is a good enough test, and as you can see, Microsoft Word opened up pretty fast, and I don't really think it would be too unusable. Maybe with bigger documents you might again start running into like some RAM issues. Now if you wanted to try and multitask, like say you wanted to have both an Excel sheet open and Microsoft Word, I haven't created any Excel sheets to demonstrate. It doesn't seem too bad, honestly. You can switch between them pretty quickly. I imagine with especially some bigger Excel sheets, some big Word documents, this probably would slow down, but it's honestly not too terribly bad. And that's going to be a bit of a running theme with this video, is like, huh, you know, that's actually not too bad. But other things is definitely like, wow, why? So Office seems to work okay. PowerPoint definitely might be a bit more of an issue. Like, see, look at how much faster that runs once it's like already cached into RAM. That loads stupid fast. The XP Tour, the animated tour especially, does not run very fast.
Welcome to Windows XP from Microsoft.
I think the low frame rate there,
Experience the best.
best might actually be on the CPU.
Windows XP.
Yeah. Yeah, the slowness, that might actually be on the CPU. I don't think that would be a RAM thing, but... So if you wanted to do the tour, much better off doing the HTML tour, which that kind of brings us to web browsing. I'll probably cut in some footage of me browsing actual, like, websites that are, of course, simpler, that are mostly, like, HTML3 with very little in the way of, like, JavaScript and stuff. In all honesty, browsing on Internet Explorer is not too bad. It's about as fast as I would expect it to be on a machine like this, maybe running 98. So yeah, web browsing would have been fine. Obviously, probably limit yourself to a single, browser window. Yeah, I think a lot of the bottleneck you would have had from web browsing back in the day would have just been using dial-up internet. Now, of course, this is all very simple HTML. There's not a whole lot going on here. Anything that has a lot of JavaScript or really heavy CSS, and probably not going to be a fantastic experience. So what about some simpler games, like Roller Coaster Tycoon here? As you can probably guess, this runs fine. It took about like a minute to load, which is I'm not really used to seeing, but once you get past the loading, it seems to run, well enough for what it is. It might get a little slower with like some really complex, builds and stuff like that, but as it stands right now, just some simple messing around, it seems to be working, relatively okay. You can play games on it, just, of course, within reason. But let's take a look at something that's a little bit more intense. So you've probably been looking at this Windquake icon for a little while and probably wondering how well it performs. Well, it's not bad. Of course, if you wanted to actually play Quake on a system like this, you're much better off playing like the DOS version, in an actual like DOS compatible OS. Because the actual frame rate here is a lot lower than you'd expect for a Pentium 233. So like it seems like it's going pretty fast, and it is. So yeah, 29.5 FPS. Yeah, that's definitely not what I would expect from a Pentium 233. I would expect it to be more like in the 50s. 50s is probably a good benchmark for, at least like the DOS version. And Windquake should not be sapping that much performance out of it. Yeah, I don't think that's down to the RAM. I think that might just be XP just having a lot more overhead. If anybody knows why exactly it's like so much lower than it should be, I'd be interested to hear why. And this is at 320 by 240, so it's not like I'm running it at 640 by 480 or anything like that. So yeah, I don't know what's going on here, but I was expecting it to run a little better, because I figured once it was loaded into RAM, it wasn't going to really have too many issues. So yes, these are Photoshop documents over here. I did mess around with some Photoshop on here. I installed a copy of 4.01 LE. If we go here into Photoshop, Photoshop works well enough. I imagine if you got some really big images and we're working on like really multi-layer projects and there was a lot going on, I imagine it would probably slow down quite a bit, but that might honestly be more down to the CPU speed rather than the purely the RAM, although I imagine the RAM would also have an impact. So, I just kind of messed around doing, a multi-layer image. I think this is at 1024 by 768. Just kind of messing around, applying different, filters. Like, you know what, here, let's, Gaussian blur. We're taking it up to 17 pixels, that's quite extreme, but, there you go, it's done. That wasn't really that long. Just in general, Photoshop works better than you'd probably expect it would. It's surprising that it can do it. I was honestly expecting it to be a little worse than it was. Now, how does it play video? Video is, of course, a little bit more of a challenge, but I think you'd be surprised to see, like, here, let's just watch the default WMV that comes with Windows Movie Maker. Takes a little while to load, but once it gets mostly loaded, it's not too bad. Of course, this is very low resolution. This is probably sub 240p, but I did try editing on Windows Movie Maker, and believe it or not, it is almost kinda usable. You can see I can actually scrub around, and it doesn't take like 10 billion years to catch up. This is honestly like probably the most impressive thing I've seen this thing do. It's impressive, one, that it's on a Pentium MMX 233. I would have expected this to, you know, not really run at all, even with more RAM, but also that this is running on XP with 64 megabytes of RAM is really impressive. Now, actually playing it in the timeline here, it kinda works. It's not great. I did manage, though, to edit together the video, so let's go ahead and watch it here.
How much do you think that Miami Vice reverse E's worth? 1,000? Can you believe it? P.O. Box 286868686, Nebraska.
So there you go. I hope you like my editing quality. It can surprisingly play video, which is not what I was expecting. And here's the original, pretty infamous commercial. I think everyone's seen this before.
Wait just 1 minute before you answer.
If we try to go like full screen here, I don't think it really can cope with it.
Windows integrates Lotus 123 with Miami Vice. Now we can take and paste it right into Windows Right. Now, how much do you think
I don't know if that's down to like the video card. I don't think it would be. That's probably more of a CPU limitation, to be honest. But it can kind of play video, and that's what matters. Oh yeah, and if you're wondering if maybe the new like Luna theme kind of contributes to some of the slowness, it doesn't really. You can put on the classic theme, and it doesn't really change it that much. Like, maybe it loads some of the desktop elements a little quicker, but it's not like... It's nothing, like, game-changing. So if you like the Luna theme, you probably could just stick with that. And so now for the moment that at least I've been waiting for, how much does a simple doubling of the RAM improve the performance of this machine? If my theory is correct, it should be a decent bit better. Alright, I got the second stick of RAM in there, so we're up to 128 megabytes, so we're gonna see if the boot time improves at all, so now. Alright, just gonna go ahead and close out Messenger here because why have it open? One thing I noticed too when it was booting up, there was a lot less hard drive thrashing as well. Task Manager seemed to open up faster. We have 54 megabytes available apparently. Let's try opening my computer. Maybe a little faster. Again, part of this is probably down to the hard drive. And maybe a little bit the CPU, but so far this is seeming a little bit better. Hopefully I'm not, like, being too biased. Let's open up, like, Word. That was probably about the same. I just feel like things are a little faster, and the boot time definitely confirms that. It is somewhat faster, at least. Alright, now I'm really curious if Windquake is going to increase its performance at all. I have a feeling no, but who knows, I could be wrong. 28 went down. No. 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 How could it go down? Okay, it's right back to 29.5. Okay, so Quake did not increase at all. I guess just the initial run, it was still loading things from the hard drive. It does seem to be a little faster. I would say this is a little faster. You could definitely get away with more multitasking See how well our video plays in comparison. I mean, it ran pretty well the first time, so... I think it loaded a little faster.
Just Windows integrates Lotus 123 with Miami Vice.
Alright, let's see if full screen's any better. I'm gonna say no.
Now we can take this
Nope.
battery and paste it right into Windows Right. Now, how much do you think Microsoft Windows is worth? Don't answer. Wait until you see Windows Right and Windows Paint, and then listen to what else you get at no extra charge. The MS-DOS Executive, an appointment calendar, a card file, a notepad, a clock, a control panel.
It's actually kind of impressive. You can drag the window around and it's still, like, watchable.
Can you believe it? Reversi! That's right! All these features in Reversi, all...
I'm curious if Movie Maker is going to be any better. I'm going to say no. I think that's a little more down to the CPU for some of this. If we had a faster hard drive for this, I think it would be a better test, to be honest. Like, if I had put in, like, a SD card or something, I think that would have freed up the hard drive bottleneck somewhat, and we would have been able to see a better representation. But I wanted to be true to the spirit and use a real, like, around 2 gig hard drive. I don't have a 1.5 gig hard drive, but the whole system just in general feels a little snappier. Like, opening up Explorer windows much faster. Start menu and everything else just feels more responsive.
Welcome to Windows XP from Microsoft, the new version of Windows that brings your PC to life.
I can't tell if the tour is actually better or not. I don't think it is.
XP. Best for business.
Okay, no, it's definitely not any better. So, I think my conclusion that the RAM is a big factor, I think is true. I mean, Microsoft even puts it on the bottom of the box that 64 megabytes may limit performance and some features. I'm not exactly sure what features, because, like, even Movie Maker worked, which was, like, really surprising, but there's probably something I'm overlooking that maybe would be hampered substantially by 64 megabytes. I don't know. So I kind of have my conclusion here to what I think is there really wasn't any point in upgrading to XP for a machine like this. I guess you would have did it just because you fell for the marketing and whatnot, because, ooh, experience the best of the digital age, your computer will be faster. I would definitely take this machine with 98, or especially 95, over XP any day. Or, heck, even Windows 2000 would still be slower than either of those, but it would just be a little better, I think, than XP. It uses a less RAM by default. It's just a little bit of a lighter weight OS. I mean, that's just the plain and simple fact of it is. And I think this really does highlight that, yes, XP was a little bit bloated for its day. A lot of people are probably used to XP running on, you know, much faster computers, and they kind of forget that XP was a little bit more heavy than you might really expect. Even on something like a Pentium 3, it can at times show through a little bit. Especially anything I'd say like a Pentium 2 or older, you could probably really tell with XP versus, say, like 98. And some of the performance hit is also going to be on the CPU and not just the RAM. RAM is definitely the big factor, I think, but CPU-wise, I think 98 would probably be less intensive, probably use a lot less CPU cycles than XP, because I've seen comparisons of like 98 versus XP on like a Pentium 2, and there are certain things that were much faster under 98 compared to XP, so that's certainly a factor as well, I would think. I imagine it would probably be exacerbated even more by a Pentium 1 compared to a Pentium 2. And we also have to factor in that I'm using a really old, slow hard drive. But yeah, I think I'm happy putting this topic to rest. XP on the official minimum system requirements is, well, not ideal. It's usable. In fact, more things are usable than I initially thought they would be. But that doesn't mean it's a good experience, or that you should have, you know, upgraded to XP from, say, 98 or something like that. So I'd say I've redone the original video. I've done the topic justice. And yeah, thank you for watching. If you've stuck around somehow since the original video, thank you. or if you're somewhat newer, I suppose you could give the original video a watch. I haven't watched it in forever. I can't not imagine that it's very good, but... So I guess this is kind of the unintentional 1,000 subscriber special video. I didn't really intend it to be that way, it just kind of works out. I just kind of thought of it up on a whim after I accidentally deleted my SD card. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hopefully you found it somewhat interesting. It's probably not the most interesting topic, but, you know, I feel like it needed to be done, so thanks for watching, and you guys have a good one.